So I miss Flash games. If you don't know what Flash games are, maybe because you're young or just didn't have a PC during their popularity, Flash games are games made using a program called Flash. It was owned by different companies at different times, so for the longest time it was Adobe Flash, but before that it was Macromedia Flash, and before that it was actually called Future Splash Animator. But anyways, it was a fantastic program that has since, unfortunately, ended its life cycle. I'll get more into Flash in a second, but I want to go back and emphasize the appeal of Flash games. Really any browser games. You know, not all browser games were Flash games, but I'm basically gonna lump them all under Flash games for the time being. You know, just like those cartoony browser games. Most of them were made with Flash. But yeah, I want to emphasize the appeal of them. They were almost always completely free games. They generally had like a cartoony appearance, and they were often made by a single person. They would then be hosted on Flash game sites where there would be catalogs of hundreds of, again, free games that you could play directly in your browser. You know, you didn't have to install it. They were largely projects of passion for the creators, you know, games made just entirely to share fun experiences, which is just great, you know? The websites that hosted these games made money off of ads, but they definitely weren't like raking in a ton of cash. And most of the creators of these games were making like little to no money at all. Going back to Flash, this program was like the quintessential animation program of the early 2000s. And then Flash Player, a program that allows you to play Flash files for free, came pre-installed in most browsers for years. Not only was it perfect for like web-based animations, you also had the ability to code within the software using a special like purpose-built coding language, ActionScript. It was basically a form of JavaScript tweaked to work more intuitively with the animation side of Flash. This made the program really powerful given how easy it also was to learn, and it was so useful that like whole websites were sometimes made out of Flash. This also made the program popular with like more malicious actors. Like, you know, it was often the tool that was used to create those annoying pop-up ads that really plagued like early 2000s internet. But let's talk games. Remember when I said that these games would be hosted on Flash game sites? There were a seemingly endless amount of these, but some really stand out. The most iconic is probably Newgrounds. This was a site dedicated to like art, animations, and games. Not only did this like hold a ton of iconic Flash games, it even resulted in several like console games like Alien Hominid and Super Meat Boy. You know, and then there's the various websites for TV channels, especially TV channels that had cartoons. So like Nickelodeon, Disney, Cartoon Network, and Adult Swim all had their own Flash games on their websites. You know, and then there were like more educational Flash games that you could get through like FunBrain and Cool Math Games. I think Free World Group, which for me personally, these were like the only sites accessible through our school's firewall. So, you know, so if we ever had downtime, sometimes our teachers would allow us to play some of these games. You know, a lot of them were supposed to be educational. Not all of them were. You know, there were puzzle games like Block Soars. There was Mighty Guy, which definitely wasn't educational, but it was kind of like mixed in with educational games. Oh, and then there was Evolution. It wasn't educational, but it was fun. And then my favorite Flash site was probably Congregate, which they had some of their like own games with like their logos on them, right? But I think the biggest aspect of Congregate was kind of like the social element. Next to every game you played, you had a chat room. And so since everyone in the chat room was on Congregate, they were all playing Flash games. So like if you wanted to talk about the Flash game you're playing, you had someone to talk to about the Flash game you're playing. Like it was pretty much always there was people to talk to about Flash games. Not only that, but there were these badges similar to like PlayStation trophies or Xbox achievements. And there was like this whole level system, and it was done really well, I think. And you know, competing with friends to get like an impossible badge first was a lot of fun. I won, by the way. I still remember almost getting the impossible badge on Frantic 3 just for like the cookies on my computer to get erased at some point. I was one level away, and it wasn't even supposed to be the hardest level. It was like the second hardest level I just hadn't beaten yet. Hadn't like put the time into like memorizing the level, and then cookies got erased. And I was like, I'm not about to do that again. But then I got the impossible badge on Sunny 2. And so that was pretty cool. Would have been cooler if it wasn't like after Flash games kind of stopped being popular, but it was still pretty cool. I'm basically going to speed run some sites now. You know, you had Nitrome, which had like this instantly recognizable art style. You had Armor Games, which had games like Sunny and Bubble Tank, X-Gen games with Motherload and Stick RPG. There was Eyes Maze, which had a really unique brand of puzzle games. You know, there's other ones like Miniclip, Addicting Games, PopCap. Not all of these sites still host games, and I'll get to that in just a second. And I also really want to point out Battlon.com, which had these like pretty large RPGs, especially for them being based in Flash, and they were constantly updated like over years. They might even still be updated updated. I haven't checked lately, but there's like Adventure Quest and Mech Quest. And these games are really great for being free. But then, you know, you fast forward a bit and like smartphones became a thing. And then, you know, you had mobile games. And once mobile games were around, Flash games basically had like one last like wave of popularity with, you know, like some early mobile games like Angry Birds being extremely popular. Angry Birds was everywhere and it was made with Flash. But this was also around the time when browser games stopped being as popular. You know, you couldn't really play most browser games on your phone, and that's kind of the way most people were using the internet at this point, was through their phone. So, you know, and Flash was used to make mobile games, but there were other programs that you could use to make mobile games that kind of ran better and more optimized for mobile. And then going back to browser games, you know, Flash was powerful when it first came out, but you know, more and more competitors popped up over the years. And like Unity in particular was really popular because you could make even like 3D games in it while also being browser games. You know, so many developers that made Flash games for years started switching to other programs and other platforms. After all, making games takes time, and Flash games were expected to be free, with ad revenue only covering operating costs. Some experienced devs went on to release games in Steam or in app stores, sometimes even on consoles. But what happened to most Flash developers is almost untraceable. Like, they just logged off one day and didn't come back. There are obviously big exceptions, but you know, there used to be a lot of Flash game developers. And a lot of them are just, you know, doing different stuff now. So yeah, in 2020 Adobe announced they would no longer support Flash. You know, personally this came as a shock. I knew Flash games weren't nearly as popular as they had been, but like the tool was still extremely powerful, right? There were so many different uses for it. So like at the same time, you know, even though they were gonna end support for it, I thought that's fine. The version of Flash that was out was definitely good enough. You know, I certainly can't think of any improvements for it. However, once support for Flash ended, Flash players started blocking Flash content. So just like that, Flash was dead. There are alternatives for browser games, notably like HTML5 and Unity, but they have like a higher barrier to entry, so browser games are just increasingly rare. So since then, some sites that hosted Flash games have tried to cling on by linking to alternatives to Flash Player. They can run Flash files. You know, like I use the Supernova extension in Chrome. But yeah, so the Supernova extension allows you to play most Flash games in like a pop-up window, and then you'll notice it says run in Ruffle. Ruffle is also like a Flash Player emulator that, so like now on certain sites you can actually basically play Flash games like they never went away thanks to Ruffle, which is really cool. But nonetheless, Flash being shut down was such a big hassle that several websites just went away from these Flash games completely. For example, Adult Swim doesn't host any of their Flash games anymore, which is a shame because they had some cool ones, you know. Pretty much all the websites that had Flash games started focusing on other stuff, mobile games or like Steam games, you know, something where they could get a decent amount of revenue. Before I end the video, I want to shout out two places where you can actually play free games. The first is just itch.io, itch.io, I'm gonna call it itch.io, a site dedicated to like indie game development that hosts like a ton of free games. And you know, going through the free games can give you the same feeling you got from like trying new Flash games back in the day, purely like passion projects. And that's what Flash games used to be. So it's really like, I think it's something special and not everyone knows about it, so I thought I'd point that out, in addition to some of the Flash sites I mentioned that still exist. And then another big thing I want to shout out is Flashpoint Archive, which is actually where I got most of the footage for this video. It's an open source project to save and host like as many Flash games as possible. You know, there are a few games that are missing for various reasons, but it's a massive archive, so it's cool. So yeah, I've been having a lot of fun playing with Flashpoint Archive lately. That's kind of why I made this whole video, to be honest. But yeah, thank you for watching. Please like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe if you want to watch more. I'm working on a bunch of neat stuff that I can't talk about yet, but I'm excited for like when the pieces all start to fall together. I'll see you again next time.
I won, by the way.